Hey everybody, this is Jim the Tabletop Engineer, and welcome to a new Let's Paint Some Minis video. Today I'm going to be painting 4 zombies. They're 2 and 2. 2 of them are identical, the other 2 are identical, but I'm going to be painting them the same color scheme using the speed paints. As usual, when I do these mini painting videos, I tend to pick a topic and chat about it. And so today I am going to chat about something I'm doing that's new. I'll tell you why I'm doing it and how it came about. So let me go ahead and get some paints out here. I'm going to need some blacks. I'm going to need some malignant greens. Maybe some browns. Let's see. Definitely some bone, pallid bone. All right, so today what I'm going to talk about is I have just started a new newsletter. Let's just call it a newsletter. A couple years ago, for those of you that don't know, I had a publication that I released monthly, and I did it for a year. It was called the RPG and War Game Supply Sourcebook. Quite a mouthful. It was a monthly full-color PDF document, and what I did was each issue was divided into sections. Like there was a Kickstarter section, there was a terrain, there was a miniature section, there was an RPG, and so what I did was I reached out to game companies that made games or sold supplies or resources that gamers would use, and I would offer them a full color ad in the book for like $5. It wasn't meant to be like a super serious like mega publication where I was going to be making millions of dollars, right? It was more to just, I thought it would be fun to have a catalog, kind of like the Sears toy catalog that a lot of us grew up with. I thought it would be fun each month to have this catalog that would go out, and it would be in full color, and you could just flip through it and see these awesome pictures of games and miniatures and terrain. And if it grabbed your attention, I also embedded a link in every image so that you could click on it and go straight to their website or whatever it happened to be. If it was a store, it was a storefront or some private website, whatever. And it was fun. I did it for an entire year. And when the source book, when I closed it up after a year, and I'll explain why I closed it up, I had about, 400, somewhere between 400 and 500 subscribers, right? That's people who, and it didn't cost anything. Actually, I did have a patron for it, which didn't really do well, because what I did was I basically said, okay, if you're a patron, you get it like a week early. And which is kind of silly because, I thought people might pay the $5 a month, or I think it was maybe $2 a month to get it a week early, but it just didn't take off, and that was fine. But the source book was well received. Everybody I got a lot of compliments on it, and I think it had to do with the fact that it was this full color PDF, 8.5 by 11. All the images in it were full color, very vibrant. People emailed me and told me they liked the embedded link, so that if they saw something that appealed to them, they could click it and go right away to it. And so after a year, I had to make the hard decision to stop it. It was sort of an experiment that didn't really go as planned. And in some ways it did go as planned, and in others it didn't. And I'll tell you why I shut it down. Okay. There were a lot of reasons I shut it down. One of the primary reasons was it was just very time consuming. So let me tell you how it worked. The publisher, the game companies, like if you were an RPG seller or a 3D terrain seller or something, what I did was I would charge you $5 a month, and you got to run a full page ad, right? And that ad would run basically forever. I think I had it set up where you just pay the $5 and your ad would run forever. My thinking was that companies would want to change their ad either monthly or every other month. And so what I did was I just basically said, pay $5 to place an ad. If you want to change the ad, it's another $5, which I didn't think was going to break the bank. And most companies told me that it was not a bad investment. They saw it as a way to get eyeballs on their stuff. I didn't charge the reader for it, right? It was free download. And I got a lot of compliments from the sellers who advertised in it. But what I did was, as I said, a seller could pay $5 and update their ad each month. So the first problem was most advertisers were not doing that. They would pay their $5, they would get the ad, and it would just be stagnant. Every month it was the same ad, same ad, same ad, same ad. And I didn't really have a problem with that, but I did get feedback from readers who were like, they knew that I was offering to sellers to change their ad monthly, and they wanted to see a change. I had people say, so and such companies run the same ad for 6 months. Do they have anything else? And I would have to reply, well, they pay per ad, and if they want to change it, they have to pay. And so what I found is businesses really weren't wanting to pay $5 a month to put a new ad in each month. Now, that's not to say there weren't companies that did that. I did have a number, probably more than 20, that every month they would pay another $5 and they would send me their new ad. So here comes the second problem. The second problem was, in order to release the content consistently, I had deadlines. So I would tell my sellers, the advertisers, that the deadline to get your ad for the next month was, say, April 15th. Okay, April 15th, you got to have your ad in so that I can put the thing out on April 30th, 2 weeks later. It was usually 1 week. I had it 1 week before the thing released. And inevitably, and I understand I run a business, but inevitably, I would have businesses that would wait until the absolute day before it was to release, and they would email me and say, hey, can I go ahead and flip out my ad? And, it's hard to say no to paying customers, right? You put a deadline out there, but they don't always adhere to it. And so what I found was it was very hard to get started on the next month's issue because I was working on the current one right up until the deadline. And it just wasn't very efficient. And this wouldn't just be a one-off. This would be like, 5-10 people would want to replace their ad on the next to last day. Also, I would receive new advertisers right up until the last minute, even though it clearly said if you want to advertise, you have to have your ad in by, the 15th of the month or whatever. But again, when you've got a new customer who says, I'm sorry, I missed the deadline, can I go ahead and place it? You hate to say no. And so my problem was I said yes a lot. I said, sure, yeah, no problem, which caused a lot of stress and last minute changes. And then, as I mentioned, every ad had an embedded URL, right, where you could just click on it and go to that website. Well, along with placing a new ad, advertisers were allowed to change the link. So if they had a new URL or a new product, it could link to a new product or a new website. And it was the same thing. That was the deadline. Get me your new URL before April 15th, and I'll get it put in the magazine. Well, the companies that this was more than one problem. The companies that had never advertised would send me a URL, and then right before it would go to publication, or right before I'd be sending it out to all the subscribers, I'd get an email from a dozen companies. Oh, my URL, I need to change it. And it doesn't sound like a lot of work, but believe me, it is. When you have 20 times a month, maybe sometimes more, URLs that have to be changed, it slows you down. Now, the other thing that was happening is this was a live PDF. So if there were mistakes in it, I could fix them fairly quickly and just upload, because the document was basically made available off of DriveThruRPG. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with DriveThruRPG, when you upload a file, if you make any updates to it, you can you can make an update and it will push out an email to all the subscribers or buyers. And it was a zero cost item, by the way. So it would send out an email saying, hey, there's an update. So I'd make a change, and I'd update the thing, and then hours would go by, and some other company would say, oh, you know what, we made a mistake. This points to a dead link. Can you change it? I'd change it, and I'd go and upload the new PDF, and it would push an email out. So I was really aggravating existing subscribers because they would get an email every time I updated it, and it was being updated a lot. The other problem is sometimes they would send me a URL, and in my rush to get things out the door, I would make the mistake. And I don't blame them for this, but I would make a mistake with a URL, and then I'd get an email saying, Jim, the URL for our ad is pointing to the wrong one, or to the old one, or you didn't update it. So it was this snowball effect. It just, the source book never got finalized for that month. Do this for 12 straight months, and I think you may understand my frustration. And again, I don't blame the businesses. They were paying me to have a URL put in, and they would get me their ad. Sometimes they would get it to me well in advance. Sometimes they'd get it to me on the last day. But it just made it very hard to run something of this caliber and this size on a month-to-month basis when I just could not get it locked down, so to speak, right? The source book just never was completed, and I was working on the next month's, and so I would start this process all over again a month later. I would have sellers who were angry because I made a mistake with their URL, and I would apologize and say, hey, I'll give you a free change next month. Just get me your new ad, no cost. Just give me your new ad, your new URL by the 15th. Would they do it by the 15th? Most would, but not always. So that was a problem. And then the other thing is inevitably there were people who were dissatisfied. The ad was not as high a resolution as they wanted, because when you send out a 200 to 300 page, honestly, this thing was 200 to 300 pages. When you send out a 200 to 300 page full color PDF, you have to run it through some special software that sort of compresses it, right? So that you're not downloading a 300, 500 megabyte PDF every month. People don't want to do that. And so I would have to run it through compression software. And yeah, sometimes an ad, the green might be off, or maybe there was a little fuzz, something was a little fuzzy because it lost I would get yelled at, nasty emails, and remember, I'm charging like $5 a month for a full color ad in a PDF that's going to be replaced next month. People are going to move on to the next one. But, I get it. When you're a business, you're watching your dollars, and you want to make sure when you spend, you're getting your money's worth and stuff like that. So I totally understand. But as this was going on, I was making maybe, I think at the highlight, I was making about $500 a month profit. So it was paying sort of for my time to make the magazine each month. But then it took a nosedive when people would place ads and then they wouldn't update them. And so I went down to like maybe $300 a month. Well, $300 a month, that's a good bit of change. But when you're spending 10 hours a week on this thing times 4 weeks is what? 40 hours? And you're making $300 for 40 hours worth of work. You're making minimum wage, which I'm not knocking minimum wage, but I can be a technical writer and make a higher living, better, higher salary. So it was a labor of love to do, but it was quickly becoming not so much a love anymore. It was a labor. And so I made the hard decision to shut it down. And it really, I really didn't want to do it. I loved seeing each issue on my iPad. I would open it up before I would send it out to everybody and just look through it, make sure everything was good. And it was so cool to see these terrain and games and miniatures and STL files being advertised for all this. I mean, it was a Christmas catalog for gamers. It really was. And so making the decision to shut it down was quite difficult. But I just couldn't do it anymore. It was becoming too time consuming. The base of customers was getting larger. The book was actually growing in size. I mean, when it first came out, it was like maybe 100 pages. By the time I shut it down, it was probably close to two, but it was somewhere between 200 and 300 pages a month. And I was getting new advertisers, $5 here, $5 there. But again, they weren't re-upping. They would just put it in there and it would just run month to month to month to month. And it kind of defeated the purpose of what I really wanted from the source book. I wanted the source book to be up to date. I wanted businesses to see it as, you're getting 500 eyeballs a month or 1,000. I forget what it was. It was close to 1,000 subscribers. It may have been over 1,000 subscribers by the time I had to pull the trigger. But remember, the subscribers weren't paying for it. They were just downloading it for free. But for $60, if you changed your ad every month, it would cost you $60. For $60 to get your advertisement in the eyeballs of 1,000 gamers, I felt that was a pretty stinking good deal. I've looked into advertising some of my own stuff in gaming magazines, and let me tell you something. It's crazy. I mean, I can't afford it. I cannot afford it. Small-time publishers just can't advertise in the magazines, and do it at a cost-effective manner for what for the audience size that they'd be getting. So I shut it down, and I did get some. Some businesses said, "Man, we hate it. We loved it. It was so good for us." And trust me, I hated to shut it down because I did have some businesses that were doing new ads every month, and they were doing sort of what they were supposed to be doing, and I didn't expect people to do it every month. If you did it quarterly, that would be great, but it basically was stagnating. The source book was becoming just from month to month, only maybe 20% of it would change, and that's just. But I was still doing the same amount of work each month, fixing URLs. Because businesses would often not change their ad, but they'd email me and say, "Hey, we don't have a new ad for you, but can we change our URL to this?" And that's my fault. I should have said, "I'm sorry, no, that's a $5 fee." But I wasn't doing this. I guess in a way I was doing this in the hope that maybe it could become a paid, like it could pay me for the time I put into it, and really become something beneficial to the gaming community and also beneficial to me in the sense that I could do it. Like, that could become a gig for me. But it did not turn out to be that way. And I did have some businesses that were not happy. They're like, "Oh, we kind of committed to this for a year." And I'm like, "No, you didn't. you paid one ad. You paid $5 and I, that's all. And it ran for 8 months or 9 months or whatever. But no, you didn't, I never promised that it would run forever. But yeah, I did have a few, not many, a few emails from some advertisers that were not pleased with me shutting it down without any notice. And I understand, I couldn't have, but I could not have done it for another month or two. I was losing my mind trying to keep up with that thing. So very long story. Long story short, the source book lived and survived, and it ran for about a year. No, it ran for a year, 12 issues. And it was enjoyable, and I met a lot of contacts and people out there in the gaming world, and who've become friends and supporters, and no regrets there. So, jump forward a couple years, and those of you who know me, you know that in a previous life I was a technical writer. I've spoken to a lot of writers, and they'll tell you the exact same thing. Writers who really write for a living, if they're not writing, they get a little antsy. At least that's what I hear from many writers I speak to. They get a little antsy, and I get antsy if I'm not creating something, if I'm not writing something. And I'm talking about personal. Like, when I was writing books, that was fine. That kept me busy. But a lot of times I would have a blog on the side or something where I just documented my days, and I didn't do it for, like, the audience. I just did it for my sanity. And a lot of writers do that, especially fiction writers. They'll have a blog where they write about things other than their fiction stories, right, or their novels or whatever. They're just things that they're thinking about. And so not not lately. I guess it was maybe a month or two ago. I had someone reach out to me and ask me. They said, have you ever thought about bringing the source book back? And I was like, no. I mean, I didn't say it, but my immediate, thought in my head, inside my head, was not a chance. But then they were like, that was just such a great resource, and it was always cool that you introduced us to new things that we might not have found, and blah. And I got it. I was like, I emailed them back and said I really appreciate it, but the source book was an experiment. I tried it. It just couldn't take off. So it just kind of stuck with me. I was like, I really did like doing it, but the source book also never matured into what I hoped it would be. I wanted it to not just be advertisements for sellers. I wanted it to have game reviews. I wanted it to have freebies like, adventures and like little adventures. And I did put some of that in there. There were some advertisers like LV42, which does sci-fi terrain, 3D STL files. They were giving me every month like a comic book style adventure, like a what do you call it, a battle report, but it was in this, like, it used photos of the actual like battle, and it had cartoon narrations like the bubble. It was just cool. If you were a reader at that time, you probably remember it, and it was just such a cool thing. But the source book never really turned out the way I wanted it. It just it never reached that point. Now, if it had been somewhat more financially viable, if I had been getting more ads for it, for example, and I gave it another year, I think maybe within another year, it could have possibly reached a point where I was having interviews and game reviews and stuff, because I was starting to reach out to people I know and asking them if they would want to contribute something to it. And but again, it didn't happen. I shut it down, and that just didn't happen. So again, recently someone asked, would you be willing to redo it? And my response was, not really. I'm not going to do it, because I remember, it's still fresh in my memory. I remember how much time I had to spend on it. And I also remember that, it was just a lot of work for very little reward. And I'm not talking about a financial reward. I'm talking about the personal rewards I gained from doing it. I was proud of it. It was a very cool PDF to hold in my hands, and shoot, picked the wrong one. I really did enjoy it, but it was a lot of work. And so the answer is, I doubt the source book will ever make it back to I doubt it'll ever come back to life. Now, that's not to say somebody one day might not try their hand at it and give it a shot, and I more power to them. Maybe they can figure out what I did wrong. But not going to happen. But it did get me thinking that I did have a time when I was really enjoying the creative part of it, like putting it together and reaching out to the client, the sellers, and coordinating with them to get new ads or their existing ads, and at the same time, I was having some personal issues at home with one of my children who was going through some school stuff that just wasn't a good time for him, and I was trying to spend as much time as possible when he came home from school. I was trying to spend time with him, actually both of my boys, and not be the working dad, not trying to be more there. And it was during these times that I started thinking about what could I do that would bring me enjoyment, that would scratch that writing itch. And that's when I came up with this idea that, I subscribe to a lot of newsletters. I enjoy getting them. And the ones I enjoy getting the most are not like real long. They're not heavy, pushy in terms of selling stuff. They're just, the person who makes it is just sharing either their personal it's a personal blog like newsletter, or they're forwarding you to articles that they've read that they find of interest. And so I was like, that's the kind of thing I would not mind doing. It would not take an exceeding amount of time to put together, a few paragraphs or even a few pages per month, per week. I was thinking weekly, and I was thinking I could do that. And so I started doing some research, and I found some people online that recommended a website called Substack. I researched them. I did all my research, and it definitely appeared to be like a pretty cool service. And so I pulled the trigger, and I started thinking about what would I do. Well, my hobby is gaming, as is yours if you're probably watching this. And so I was like, well, what is it going to be about? Well, it's going to be about gaming, but that's kind of vague. And so I went back to the source book, and I remembered that the source book was divided into categories. And I thought, oh, I could do a newsletter and break it up into categories. And the categories might change month to month. There might be some months, for example, when I have nothing to share regarding 3D terrain or, wargaming. I don't know. But I was like, okay, I could do this. And so I created a format of a letter, and I just sort of put it on the back burner. I said, okay, this is going to sit here, and I'm going to treat it as like when I have an idea, I'll just go drop it in there. And I'll see how long it takes me to fill up a newsletter. Like, how long would it take to send out something that I personally, if I received it, I would go, oh man, this is kind of cool. And it took about a week. I was like, a lot of things fall into my lap. People email me. Companies still share things with me. I get leads on things. People say, oh, by the way, next month I'm gonna launch this Kickstarter. And I know what, I know they do it because I have an audience. I have a website, and I have a Facebook group, and I'm a member of the Tabletop Crafters Guild, and I don't mind that. I want them to tell me, right, so that I can share it with other people. And so that's what they do. People are sharing, they're sharing things with me, and now I have an outlet to get that news out to people. But I wanted it to have a personal touch. Like I just don't want it to be nothing but advertisements. So when you read my newsletter, you're gonna see things that catch my eye. Not necessarily that I'm putting in there because someone's paying me money. Right now, it's a free newsletter. I'm not charging. I don't plan on charging readers for it ever. Now, Substack does allow you to monetize it in the sense that you can turn it on, and if people want to, pay $1 a month or $5 a month or whatever, they can. But that's not my goal. Not my goal. And so what I'm thinking is that I'll keep it to a certain length and size. It'll come out weekly, but it's going to be my take on things. I'll give you my opinions when necessary, or if I don't have an opinion, I'll just say, "Hey, this caught my eye. Maybe you'll find it of interest." I don't really have a goal in mind for it yet, and maybe like the source book, the newsletter may evolve. It may find its identity not in the next week or two. It could take a while, but I'm committed to it. I want to be able to do something with writing, but I don't want to be putting something out heavy duty, like real big every month. Now, I do that already with a couple zines I do. So I'm busy. I got plenty to keep me busy. I don't need any more work. But the newsletter, honestly, is not, I'm finding it not to be that much work. It is, now I'm only one in. I'm only one newsletter in. The second one's already done, and they'll come out every Monday. The second one's already done. The third one's about half done. So I'm trying to get like a month or two built up, and that gives me breathing room. So if I need to take a few days or do some personal stuff or spend some time with my kids, I don't feel like I'm going to be leaving you guys hanging. So excuse me. So that's the news about the newsletter. That's a little bit of history about where it came from. What its origins are. Is that source book. The source book was, I mean, I miss it. I really, really was proud of it, but it just wasn't going to be sustainable long term for the time I was having to put into it. It just wasn't going to happen. And I know a lot of people were disappointed when it went away. By the way, I'm dry brushing some white on the black to bring out the dungeon tile here. And I'll include some photos of these before and after so you can see what I've done. But again, all of this is being done with speed paints, by the way. All of it's being done with speed paints. I did pre-order the next batch of speed paints, but I haven't heard anything about when they're coming out or whatever. I'm seeing videos of people who've gotten them, and they're raving about them and saying, "Oh, they're awesome," and it's more variation of colors and more skin tones and stuff. But nope, nothing for me yet. I haven't got mine. So anyway, if you're watching this and you're looking for a newsletter that isn't going to be over the top, like really annoying, crazy, you might want to check it out. I will put a link in the video in the video description below so that you can subscribe. It's free. If you can unsubscribe anytime you want. I'm not gonna, and I don't sell. I don't share my my mailing list. And that was another thing. When I shut down the source book, I had so many businesses that were wanting me to share my my contact list, all those email addresses, and I just I realized it's a lot of that had value, but I had told my buyers early on that was the rule. I would not sell their stuff or give it away, so I had to abide by that, and I had no trouble with that, even though some people were a little aggravated. I just said, nope, my promise to the subscribers was I would never sell it. And so I tell you that with this newsletter as well, that the information there is private and it will not be shared or sold. All right, well, that's all I've got. I painted how long did this video go for? Let me see. It went for 30 minutes. 30 minutes, and I got 4 zombies painted. Not too shabby. So when they dry, what I do is I give them a coat of clear matte varnish just to protect the paint. And these are like low cost zombies. I'm not going to spend hours on them. So just being able to throw some green on them and some browns and things like that, I'm quite pleased with how they turned out. All right, that's all I got. This is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. Thanks for joining me in this Let's Paint Some Minis video. I'll be back again very soon. I got plenty of minis to paint, so there's no shortage there. If you have any questions about anything you've seen, what I've done, about the newsletter or whatever, just post it in the comment below, and I will do my best to answer it. All right, this is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again very soon. Until then, everybody, take care.